Welcome to this last installment of our Progressive Era unit. Today, we're going to focus in on reforming society. We're going to first take a look at the ongoing struggle of African Americans to gain equality in the United States. In order to do this, we're going to look at two of the Progressive Era leaders of this movement, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington founded the Tuskegee Institute, which was a vocational training school, all in an effort so African Americans could learn a trade and then get a job. This institute reflected Washington's belief that African Americans should work hard to gain respect and status over time, and that they should be patient and take advantage of any opportunities that are given to them. In 1901, Washington will be invited to the White House by President Theodore Roosevelt. This was met with quite the backlash, especially, as you can imagine, from the South. One Memphis paper, in reference to Roosevelt's invite, said that it was the most damnable outrage which has been perpetrated by any citizen of the United States. W.E.B. Du Bois did not necessarily agree with Booker T. Washington's approach to gaining rights for African Americans. Du Bois didn't see it as needing to be a gradual endeavor. He thought that African Americans should demand their rights now. So he founded, along with others, the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Through this association, they would push hard for civil rights through political action, so through court cases, through lobbying, and that they would protest unfair treatment, and they would fight for equality. Now let's shift gears away from the fight for equality for African Americans and talk about Jane Addams. Jane Addams is really one of the first social workers in America, if you will. She will found Hull House in the city of Chicago in 1889. She does this in order to help out the urban poor and also to help immigrants in an effort to help them assimilate into American culture. Hull House would provide health care, English lessons, employment advice, child care, and many other services in order to enrich the lives of these people seeking help from Hull House. The Hull House is an example of a settlement house, which is a community center that provided social services to the urban poor. Recently in the news, it has become known that the Hull House Association, which is derived from the original Hull House, will be ceasing operations due to lack of funds. Next, we're going to turn our attention to two reform movements spearheaded by women. The first was the temperance movement, and this was the movement to ban alcohol. This movement would gain steady support from the mid-1800s into the early 1900s. At the helm of this movement were women such as Carrie Nation, who was famous for carrying around a hatchet, going into saloons, busting up the place and destroying bottles of alcohol, all in an effort to intimidate people to stay away from it. While many other supporters would pass out pamphlets, they would participate in marches, they would join things such as the Anti-Saloon League, all in an effort to get the message out there against alcohol. And many of the participants in this movement, not just women, there were men that were a part of this movement as well, participated because they felt that the use of alcohol led to an increase in abuse towards children and towards wives. They also thought that the addiction to it would cause people to lose their jobs, and then that would in turn cause them not to be able to provide for their families. They also made the point that alcohol led to an increase in crime, people doing stupid things such as getting in fights. The movement would see success in trying to get states to ban alcohol, but in 1918 they reached their ultimate goal when the 18th Amendment is passed. And what the 18th Amendment does is it banned the sale, manufacturing, and transport of alcohol in the United States. So now the United States, all of the states, were dry, meaning there was no more alcohol allowed. Enforcing the 18th Amendment would prove to be problematic from the start. This would ultimately lead to the downfall of Prohibition. From the onstart, you would have people making their own alcohol, bathtub gin, rum runners. people asking, is this the real McCoy? And when they ask that, they're saying, hey, is this alcohol watered down, or is it the real McCoy? Is it good quality? Because some rum runners would water down their alcohol in order to maximize profits. Actually, the start of NASCAR can be linked back to Prohibition. You would see speakeasies sprout up in cities across the country, which are these secret clubs where people could go to drink alcohol. People would protest against Prohibition, and there would be a huge increase in crime, violent crime, with the mafia and Al Capone. In 1933, the government would admit defeat by passing the 21st Amendment, which repealed Prohibition, or took it back. This, though, wasn't the end of bans on alcohol in the United States. In different parts of the country, there are still dry towns and dry counties. The next movement that I want to talk about that had women spearheading it was the women's suffrage movement, which was the movement to gain the right to vote for women. This really took place in 3 different ways. The first was trying to convince state governments to let women vote. Then women would push the envelope by trying to get the courts to recognize their right to vote. Susan B. Anthony would try to vote over 150 times and be arrested numerous times for doing so. We'll talk about a specific case in class. And then third, it would evolve into women fighting for an amendment that granted them the right to vote. In an effort to better organize our thoughts, let's take a look at a timeline. If you remember, this all starts with the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, when Elizabeth Cady Stanton and supporters like Susan B. Anthony and Alice Paul will present the Declaration of Sentiments. Then, the Civil War takes place, and afterwards the 14th Amendment is passed, granting African American men the right to vote. Women will try to use this in court cases to argue that it also grants them the right to vote. Then you'll see the formation of the National Women's Suffrage Association. And then as you see Western states entering the United States as states, you'll see different laws on the books giving women the right to vote because they were out there cultivating the land right next to the men. Then you would see people coming back east, and then those women would lose the right to vote. Then in World War I, women would be used in the workplace, which would allow them to gain more respect as equals. This will ultimately come to the conclusion of the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment, which finally gives women the legal right to vote in elections at all levels of government. But just like the 18th Amendment, which banned alcohol, this will also be met with criticism, but the amendment will stand and will prove to be a success, as women in the United States still have the right to vote today. This wraps up our unit on the Progressive Era and our lesson today on reforming society. Thank you, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.